Hey everyone, it's Rye bringing you beginner guide number 6 of the Learning Lekmod series. This is going to deviate a little bit from what we were just talking about in terms of sim. And, maybe you've been taking my advice, you watched some of the Galfat guides, you've been watching my guides, you made it to stage 6, you've been practicing a little bit of the sim, and, maybe you're feeling confident, you're like, yeah, I can replicate that sim, and I can do, with every single start, I can always have my cities out really relatively fast. I can maintain my happiness. I can always have enough workers, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can do that, I think you're in a fantastic spot to kind of move into the next phase, at least with your tradition sim. And but before you move into the next phase, I want to kind of preface with what you need to be looking for and looking out to doing before you dive headfirst in your multiplayer game. And the first thing you'll realize is that in multiplayer Civ 5, war happens a lot. It's going to happen every single game, and if you're a new player, it's likely going to happen to you. People, I call it they'll welcome you to NQ by just slamming right into you. If they don't recognize your name, you're going to get slammed. And what's the, unfortunately, there's really not much you can do about getting slammed when you're new, unless your sim is extremely strong, so strong that you're scary enough to attack when people press F9. But realistically, it's unlikely any one of you guys, if you're brand new, is going to be able to have sim like that as at least as consistent as you would like. So what can you do? Okay, so the first thing you have to do is you have to be knowledgeable of what is out there and when it happens. Okay, now the last time I made something like this, I got a lot of positive feedback, but there were some people who thought that I was being a little too strict with what timings are, and those timings aren't realistic, they're too fast or whatever. I'm gonna try to take a very, very safe approach to this, so much so that I don't think anyone's going to be able to argue with any of these timings whatsoever. These should be very standard in every single NQ lobby, if not a little slow in some places. But, this is very realistic timing. So let's just jump right in to what I've prepared. And you'll see here's just like a list of all the different timings in Civ. This is primarily guided for someone who maybe has never played multiplayer, has only played multiplayer with some like some friends, and you don't really know what's out there aside from maybe crossbows, right? So this is kind of stuff you have to think about, and this is stuff that I would be top of mind for me if I'm new to the game and I'm worried about getting attacked, right? Okay, so first things first. This kind of goes to what we were saying before, but war really doesn't happen prior to turn 30 unless something went completely wrong, and it's only happened in all of the games I've ever played in NQ. This has only happened to me maybe twice, so it's extremely rare. If you find yourself in this situation, you probably did something wrong, or your opponent is absolutely brain dead. But in general, the unit in late 30s to mid 40s is chariots. And that's because, if we go into Civ, that's because these things move crazy, right? Like they can move 4 tiles, 3 tiles, and shoot. So the idea is, if I'm attacking, let's say, I'm trying to find a very chariotable city, like this one. Let's say I'm attacking Assyria here with chariots, and maybe we have very close borders or something, and maybe his start is fairly slow. What can I do? Well, if I'm an aggressive player, maybe I could settle a city right here and then road over to him, and then out of nowhere, like I have a bunch of chariots that just come in and then just start shooting a city. And this happens very fast. Like you can swarm a city, hold tiles, and just blow him up, blow the other player up very, very easily using chariots. So that's the first thing. That's the first attack, and that attack is usually complemented with spearmen. Spearmen are borderline overpowered in the early game. Um, in fact, they probably are overpowered. They one-shot chariots. They are very, very hard to take when they're sitting on a tile, especially fortified. And they can really be a huge nuisance. Okay, so the next attack, this attack happens very, very infrequently. You're not going to see that. Usually it's a Liberty player who is just going to settle 3 or 4 cities. They may have clicked Liberty by mistake, or they didn't see all their land or whatnot, and then they don't have another play. So Liberty has a lot of early hammers, so they're able to take advantage of those hammers by pumping out a ton of chariots and just killing you. So that's the first thing, and that's just called chariots. Let's fast forward maybe 10 turns. So this is late 40s to late 50s. This is actually a timing. This is the first real timing. It's typically done by honor players, but you can see it done by Liberty players, though it's fairly uncommon. It's called a compo upgrade. I actually have a video on this exact timing on my honor guide. I believe it's honor guide number 3. I could be wrong, but in that guide I kind of show you like how you would go about doing it. But in essence, it's just you build a bunch of archers, you upgrade them all to compos, and then you attack them with compos and spears. This is really strong because compos, as you can see here, do quite a bit of damage to warriors, and they do quite a bit of damage to everything. They do a bunch of damage to cities, right? So compos are very, very powerful units in the early game, complemented again with spears, because spears are really, really annoying to deal with. And that's done by honor. 50s to early 60s. This is less of a timing and more of just a pre-build a bunch of units. And when I say pre-build, I mean, build a scout, or I mean, build a bunch of units to turn until they have 1 turn left, and then finish them all in the subsequent 3 turns. And you do that in all of your cities. So then you have like 12 units out from 0 in 4 turns or something like that. Or in 3 turns if you're at 4 city. So that's this attack is not, so much of like a sole unit type, right? Like the prior ones were a lot of just chariots and a lot of compos. This one is going to be more of, it's called classical junk for a reason, right? It's just going to be like, it's going to be, catapults, chariots, compos, swordsmen, horsemen, right? Like you're throwing everything at the wall and you're just like going to kill them. This is typically done on Liberty. You can do it on honor as well, but it's a lot harder because there's a lot less early hammers on honor. But it's typically just you pre-build a bunch of in a couple of your cities, maybe like 5 cities, and then you just you get terracotta and then you go kill them. So mid 60s to mid 70s, right? This can come earlier. I've gotten crossbowed on turn 58 before. I've gotten crossbowed on turn 80 before, right? So it's just everything. But crossbows is the first true attack. The rest is kind of just gimmicky. The rest is kind of just junk. But crossbows are the first unit that are truly era defining. When you are against crossbows, it can feel incredibly hard to deal with. They will, 3-shot swordsmen, they'll 2-shot compos, they'll 2-shot warriors, they'll 2-shot spearmen. They'll absolutely decimate cities. You upgrade them. They're not super expensive to upgrade. It's 70 gold to upgrade a composite. So, doing crossbows can be extremely aggressive. Fortunately, there is a couple tells. One, you need a number of gold, right? You can't attack someone with crossbows if you only have 3. You usually need around 10 or maybe 8. So, if you're doing 8 crossbows, that's, over 500 gold. So the player that you might suspect to be doing crossbows could have a lot of gold. It's not a surefire tell, but it definitely is suspicious. And then finally, you need to get guilds. Guilds is the most. This is probably the tech that is most frequently watched by people in the lobby. When people enter guilds, they get a little scared, right? Because guilds only leads to one place, and it's usually crossbows. It could be knights, but it's typically crossbows. There's almost no reason to go guilds except if you're contesting Machu, then if you're going crossbows. So usually when people enter through guilds, it's just like alarm bells are going off in people's heads and they're like, okay, shit, like I have to start preparing for crossbows. Or it might, at that point, it might be too late, right? So that's crossbows. Crossbows is usually done by anyone. Any tree can do crossbows, but, most of the time it's tradition players. It could be fast Liberty players with Messenger. I've seen apostolic builds that do Dharma, that do crossbows. There's really no secondary unit behind crossbows. Oftentimes they'll just be frontlining the crossbows because they're so strong relative to what else is in the tech. But usually you need horsemen to take the cities. You need spearmen to hold tiles that you don't want to get slammed or whatever. So just a couple things to think about, but typically it's just I have an absolute ton of crossbows. I get terracotta on the turn after I get crossbows, and then I just absolutely decimate my opponent. In between crossbows and cavalry is a little bit of, it's kind of whatever junk attacks you have, right? This is where you get longsword treb. This is where you get like knights and crossbows and just absolute medieval junk. These attacks typically these are very, very rare because they're usually ineffective. They're fairly easy to stop, and it's not very consistent, but it can work. So I included it on here, but typically these kinds of attacks you don't see much. These happen on turns 70 to 80. It's usually just a bunch of medieval units. Usually you're pretty wide doing it. You're pre-building a number of these units, and then you're doing a similar type of attack to the classical junk, but with just medieval units, right? 80s to 90s, and again, similar type story. The difference is now we have cannons, and cannons can absolutely decimate cities, right? Like look at the damage here. Actually crazy. You can one-shot cities not on hills, literally. This is more of like a surprise attack than it is something you'd face head on, because knights aren't the best unit. They get walled pretty hard by pikemen. But if you can hold a bunch of tiles with a ton of knights and then you just put your cannons in there, you can absolutely decimate some cities and then steal some techs. Similar type of idea with cav cannon. Cav are obviously substantially stronger than the knights, about 50% stronger, but actually over 50% stronger, 75% stronger. But again, cannons aren't the best unit for killing other units. They're very, very effective at killing cities, but just not other units. Now, that's going to happen 80s to 90s-ish. All trees can really do it. Usually you pre-build a bunch of units and have some upgrades for trebuchets into cannons and stuff like that. This is turn 90-ish to 105 is when the game changes. This is when war starts becoming truly hard to defend. Everything becomes about artillery. Arty is the most detrimental thing in the entire game if used properly. It creates impossible to defend scenarios. If they have enough Arty and you have none, you're dead. Like regardless if you have more hammers than them, you're dead. Cav Arty is probably one of the biggest the best match made in heaven, because they're 2 techs away from each other. Usually you Oxford dynamite to get them at around the same time. The tells are someone has chemistry and metallurgy, which means they're going cav. So as soon as someone gets these techs, or maybe even when they enter gunpowder, right? That just should be like, okay, someone's going arty. So setting up one of these attacks can be extremely brutal. It's very hard to defend artillery. Again, you're one-shotting cities. You're killing most units with multiple arty, because you don't just come with 1 or 2 arty. You're coming with like 10 artillery and a ton of cav behind it to go and cycle on units and take tiles and whatnot. So everything becomes about arty and arty cav. So this usually happens from around mid 90s to 105. You know, there's delayed arty attacks with going factories first to get ideology, but yeah, this is the arty cav. This is what, you know, everyone talks about when they're saying arty cav. It's incredibly hard to defend and very, very painful. Okay, so 110 to 120. This is one of our first things that's kind of specific to a certain tree. This is called a bomber attack. You're gonna pretty much what you'll do is you're gonna be commerce, right? And commerce gets a number of benefits. They get 20% reduced purchasing in cities. Additionally, you can stack that with autocracy. You stack that with autocracy, which has a policy for 25% cheaper purchasing of units. And then you can stack that with Big Ben, right? Which Big Ben gives 12% reduced purchasing. And essentially, you have ridiculously cheap bombers. So they'll cost around 350 gold a piece. And because you're commerce, you're making like 700 gold a turn, and maybe you have like 6,000 gold stored up. You can buy 4 stacks of bombers and just blow someone up the next turn, right? And bombers are extremely dangerous. They can, you know, with the right promotions, they can one-shot artillery. They can two-shot cavs. You can get city stack bombers, city upgraded bombers to, you know, blow up cities. Extremely deadly attack. It's very telegraphed because, hey, you're going commerce. Hey, you're autocracy. Hey, you got Big Ben. I wonder what you could be doing, right? Like, so very, very difficult to attack. The way you attack it is you attack their strategics via, like, you know, pillaging their oil, or, you know, you set up really strong defenses with double cover infantry or Great War infantry or whatnot, and then you have a bunch of hammers behind it. Commerce lacks hammers. Typically they make up what they lack in hammers, they make up in gold. But, you know, oftentimes, depending on city layouts, right, bombers have 7 range. So, you know, if a city's here, he can't attack my city with bombers. And because he went bombers, it's often that they don't go dynamite. That's why I put the complementary unit as expeditionary forces, because expeditionary forces come at oil tech. So typically you match these two together. So that's that attack. That's going to come around 110. You can have it a little earlier, but around 110. Expect at least 2 to 3 stacks of bombers being bought on you and absolutely decimating all of your units. But it is very, very hard to attack to stop a proper bomber attack. It is possible, but it's very difficult. The way you do it is double cover. Double cover Great War infantry minimum, and eventually infantry, and they can't push into you. It's like they need 7 shots to bring 1 Great War infantry with double cover fortified in a fort to, like, they'd need 7 shots to bring it down to maybe like a quarter HP, in which case you just swap it and then you put another one in, and then they're in the same position they were just in. And because bombers are very, like, you only can put them in cities, right? You can't just, like, have them anywhere. You know, eventually your city gets full, right? You have like 6 total spots. So once you're out of shots, it's like, okay, I can't do anything for the rest of the turn. So that's how you'd stop that attack. But in general, it is very, very brutal. Following arty. So arty is one timing you'll probably see in most games. The timing that you will definitely see, if not arty, is landships. So these two are the most common timings in the game, arty and landships, followed by crossbows. So those 3 timings are like the 3 most common. Landships, again, is an era-defining unit. The thing that makes Landship strong is it's got 4 move, just like every other horse unit, but it has a 50% combat strength against all land units. Can move after attacking, and etc. So It's extremely versatile. You will slam cities with this unit. 60 combat strength is ridiculous. You'll typically you pair this with autocracy, with Clausewitz. So your landships will one-shot cavalry. They'll easily one-shot arty. You can slam one landship into. You can slam 3 or 4 landships into a city and take the city if it has no walls, right? Incredibly dangerous unit, and usually you pair this with artillery because the artillery helps break through the some of the fortified units as well as the cities. So landships, crazy. Any tree can really do it. You see it. It's most scary probably on tradition, similar to that of arty, because the timing is going to be fast and they'll have enough money and to upgrade. Usually you need about 3,000 gold to upgrade enough landships for it to be truly scary. So 3,000 gold, number of pre-builds, number of like just cav ready to upgrade. Usually it's double or triple promoted units. It's like, this is how you end the game, right? Like once we hit arty, like everything we're doing is about ending the game through domination. So these units are ridiculously strong because you have to find a way to finish the game. So landships, pretty much the entire 120s is dictated by landships and tanks. 130 plus, this is similar to that of the medieval junk and classical junk and, industrial or whatever junk, right? Where you're using tanks, you're using like real bombers, not great war bombers, which 60 strength, but instead real bombers with 12 range and 75 strength. So you're using them, you're using mobile SAMs, you're using tanks, you're using a little bit of everything. Once you hit this super late game war, tanks also have 5 movement instead of 4, which is really good. Once you hit the super late game war, it's more about like the rock, paper, scissors of it all. So, a good attack will have anti-air guns. They'll have anti-tank guns. They'll have tanks. They'll have bombers. They'll have triplanes. They'll have, some infantry. They might have some rocket arty, right? You need a little bit of everything to truly deal with everything because the combat bonuses that you get when building, when like the combat bonuses on an anti-tank gun are ridiculous, right? You have an upgrade that gives you 200% strength against any armored unit, which means tanks. So, and landships. So, this is hitting as if it's at 100 combat strength, which is absolutely decimating landships and whatnot. So you can trade evenly with something that costs substantially less, right? Like this is like 240 hammers, this is 300 hammers. This is 260 hammers. So you can very much trade up, but the way you deal with these units or with bombers, and the way you deal with bombers is with fighters or anti-air guns, but the way you deal with anti-air guns is landships. So it's a very much a rock, paper, scissors situation. And that's kind of what you see with this late game, which is kind of what determines and runs the entire 130s and 140s, and honestly for the rest of the game. But that kind of changes. And the one thing that really changes that is stealth. And stealth XCOM is probably the scariest thing in the entire game to deal with. There's no defense to stealth. They can't get intercepted. You hit like a truck. The only defense is hoping that they don't have enough aluminum or ending the game before they can kill the world. It's an absolute brutal attack. It's scariest on commerce because you can just repeatedly buy a ton of stealth. But any tree can really do it. Usually you need rationalism to get there fast enough for it to be relevant. But let me just show you kind of what the point is of stealth. So stealth have 85 combat strength. They have 24 range. To show in perspective how 24 range is, the map is only 52 wide. So this is about half the map, right? We're going from this city to here. I can hit Villainous easily, right? And the way this works late game, let me just do something real quick. Let me just fast forward 10 turns. Forgot you could do that on I know you can do it. I'm just really not familiar with IGE in this way. whatever. Let's just fortify all this stuff. So the way you do this normally, let's get autocracy. I'll show you the policy I'm talking about. Mobilization is the one that reduces purchasing by 25%. It's extremely strong. Elite forces helps you push to attacking, right? Like lots of different stuff you can do. Okay. Just gonna fast forward to prove a point. All right. So what we're waiting for is we're waiting for our spies to finish. So typically, you know, if I'm trying to attack this city, I can't. I don't have vision of it, right? I don't have vision of this city. Actually, yeah, hold on. Okay, wait. It's because IG gives you full vision, but typically, like, you wouldn't have vision. It'd be dark. But with a spy, you can see in the first ring. So what you'd normally do is you'd bomb a city down like that, kill all the units around. Obviously, this is an extreme example. It's turn 5, but, you know, kill all the units around. And then you drop your XCOM in because, again, they have a ridiculous range. 40 tiles airdrop. I could go all the way to Carthage right now. Right? Like, ridiculous. But you drop your XCOM in on the cities after blowing them up with stealth bombers. And now you're not able, you can like pillage the tiles to, you know, ruin their aluminum or whatnot, or pillage their roads. But then the next turn, you just take the city, right? And then the best part is, boop, you do it again. And this is what this is called, like, it's like an XCOM bounce. You're bouncing around your XCOM as you're just absolutely decimating all of these cities with 5 stacks of stealth bombers, and you're just absolutely shitting on everything. The way you'd counter it, mobile SAMs don't take much damage. They drastically reduce the amount taken. 150% bonus towards aircraft, as well as nukes. Nukes will kill stacks of stealth bombers, but you know, nukes are not on the way to any science victory except science. So, or until a victory condition unless it's science. So it's hard to defend against stealth, but that's the point. It's supposed to be. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this gives you some idea on, you know, the proper timings and what to expect when you're playing an NQ game. What you have to worry about, I'd say the key ones to worry about are, you know, crossbows, RDCav, and Landship. Those 3 are the most common. Those 3 will happen in every single game. Not all of them in the same game, but every game will have some assortment of crossbows, RDCav, or Landships. But yeah. Hopefully this made sense. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and stay tuned for episode 7, where we go back to talking about sim and you know, going over like how to transition in from the early game into the mid game.